Dixie Virginia Carter was born on May 25, 1939, in McLemoresville, Tennessee, a small-town girl who once dreamed of becoming an opera singer until the stage claimed her for something even greater. She found her way through Broadway and soap operas, through Different Strokes and Filthy Rich, until 1986, when she stepped into the role that would define her forever, Julia Sugarbaker on Designing Women. Julia was elegant, fierce, and absolutely unstoppable, a Southern woman who could dismantle anyone who crossed her with nothing but words and a look. Her most legendary moment came when a client casually remarked that AIDS was killing all the right people, and Julia turned, slowly, and destroyed him. Fans rewound that scene on VHS tapes across America. They called her the Terminator. She later earned an Emmy nomination for Desperate Housewives in 2007, and her final film, That Evening Sun in 2009, starred her alongside her beloved husband of 26 years, actor Hal Holbrook. Then came early 2010, a diagnosis: endometrial cancer. It moved fast. On the morning of April 10, 2010, Dixie Carter passed away in a hospital in Houston, Texas. She was 70 years old. Her husband Hal Holbrook was with her. He called it simply a terrible blow. 5 days later, on April 15th, her Designing Women sisters, Delta Burke, Annie Potts, and Jean Smart, came together one last time to say goodbye. She was buried in the town where it all began, McLemoresville, Tennessee. Annie Potts was born on October 28, 1952, in Nashville, Tennessee, and she built a career where charm and sharp humor always felt completely real. She became unforgettable as Mary Jo Shively in Designing Women, the relatable, divorced mother trying to balance life, work, and heartbreak, often delivering emotional moments that quietly stayed with the audience. But long before that, she had already caught attention with Corvette Summer, earning a Golden Globe nomination, and then came her iconic role as Janine in Ghostbusters, where her dry one-liners and attitude made even small scenes unforgettable. She later gave her voice to Bo Peep in Toy Story, connecting with a whole new generation, and returned to television as the bold, funny Mima in Young Sheldon, a role that once again put her at the center of modern audiences. Now in her 70s, Annie Potts is still working, appearing in new projects like Best Medicine and continuing her long journey in Hollywood, not slowing down, just moving forward with the same voice and presence people have loved for decades. Delta Burke was born on July 30, 1956, in Orlando, Florida, and she arrived in Hollywood already carrying a crown. At just 17, she became Miss Florida, the youngest title holder in the state's history, and that beauty queen DNA became the foundation of her most unforgettable creation. From 1986 to 1991, she played Suzanne Sugarbaker on Designing Women, the glamorous, magnificently self-absorbed ex-pageant queen who could make vanity feel like an art form. The role earned her 2 consecutive Emmy nominations for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series, and her chemistry with Dixie Carter was electric, 2 sisters who fought like it genuinely mattered because it did. Behind the scenes, a very public battle over her weight, and her contract eventually pushed her off the show after 5 seasons. She handled it with more dignity than Hollywood deserved. She later launched Delta Burke Designs, a plus-size fashion line built on body positivity at a time when Hollywood refused to have that conversation. She has been open about her struggles with type 2 diabetes and depression, using her platform honestly and without apology. Today, at 69, Delta Burke lives quietly in Florida with her husband of over 35 years, actor Gerald McRaney, the man she has always called her greatest blessing. Jean Smart was born on September 13, 1951, in Seattle, Washington, and she built her career on something rare: the ability to be both quietly funny and deeply emotional at the same time. She first became known as Charlene Frazier in Designing Women, the sweet, soft-spoken woman whose innocence often hid surprising wisdom, giving the show its heart. But that was only the beginning. Years later, she completely transformed her image with powerful roles in shows like Fargo and Mare of Easttown, proving she could handle intense drama just as easily as comedy. Then came Hacks, where she plays Deborah Vance, sharp, fearless, and brutally honest, a role that earned her multiple Emmy and Golden Globe wins and brought her back to the center of television in her 70s. Off-screen, she faced personal loss when her husband Richard Gilliland passed away in 2021, yet she kept working, channeling that emotion into her performances. Now at 74, Jean Smart isn't slowing down. She's delivering some of the strongest work of her entire life, proving that real talent only grows with time. Meshach Taylor was born on April 11, 1947 in Boston, Massachusetts, and he came to designing women almost by accident. Anthony Bouvier was written as a one-time character, a delivery man who would show up and leave. But something happened the moment Meshach Taylor walked onto that set. Anthony became impossible to let go. For all 7 seasons, he played the only man in that design firm, a warm, witty ex-convict working his way towards something better, and his friendship with Delta Burke's Suzanne Sugarbaker was quietly the most tender relationship in the entire show. In 1989, the Emmy committee noticed, nominating him for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series. He also earned a cult following as the flamboyant Hollywood Montrose in the 1987 film Mannequin, and later starred 4 seasons on Dave's World. Then in 2014, after 18 months fighting colorectal cancer that had spread to his liver, Meshach Taylor made one final trip, flying to Indiana just 1 week before his death to celebrate his mother's 100th birthday. His wife held him afterward and said, "Baby, you did your greatest performance at your weakest time." On the night of June 28, 2014, at 10:47 p.m., he passed away at his home in Altadena, California. He was 67. His wife, his 4 children, and his mother were all beside him at the end. Julia Duffy was born on June 27, 1951, in St. Paul, Minnesota, and she built her name on a very specific kind of comedy, the spoiled, perfectly ridiculous woman who somehow makes you love her anyway. From 1983 to 1990, she played Stephanie Vanderkellen on Newhart, a pampered heiress working as a maid who treated everyone around her like furniture, and she played it with such precise, committed foolishness that it earned her 7 consecutive Emmy nominations for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Comedy Series. In 1991, she joined Designing Women as Allison Sugarbaker, the anxious, tightly wound New York cousin who arrived at the firm desperately trying to prove she belonged, a completely different kind of character that showed real range. The show ended, and she kept working Drake and Josh, Reba, Night Court, and most recently Palm Royale on Apple TV+, starring alongside Carol Burnett and Kristen Wiig. In 2026, she's joining the cast of the Burbs TV series. Janet Vivian Hooks was born on April 23, 1957 in Decatur, Georgia, and what she could do with a character, a voice, or a single look was something most comedians spend a lifetime chasing. From 1986 to 1991, she was one of the brightest lights on Saturday Night Live, delivering unforgettable impressions of Tammy Faye Bakker, Nancy Reagan, and Hillary Clinton that felt less like imitation and more like reinvention. Her chemistry with Phil Hartman produced sketches people still quote today. When she joined Designing Women as the sweet, wonderfully naive Carlene Dauber, she stepped into an almost impossible role, replacing a beloved cast member, and made it entirely her own. She later voiced characters on The Simpsons and earned an Emmy nomination for Third Rock from the Sun. Then, quietly, she got sick. Throat cancer. On the night of October 9, 2014, at the age of 57, at her home in Woodstock, New York, Jan Hooks passed away. Judith Ivey was born on September 4, 1951, in El Paso, Texas, and she built one of the most quietly formidable careers in American theater before television ever came calling. On Broadway, she won 2 Tony Awards, first for Steaming in 1983, then for Hurly-Burly in 1985, establishing herself as one of the finest stage actresses of her generation. When she joined Designing Women in its final season as BJ, Poteet, the bold, big personality Texan who walked into the Sugarbaker firm and immediately owned every room, she stepped into an already iconic show and held her own without missing a beat. She later earned an Emmy nomination for What the Deaf Man Heard, appeared in The Devil's Advocate, and received wide acclaim for her role in the Oscar-nominated film Women Talking in 2022. She has never stopped working, directing productions across regional theater, appearing in Sweet Magnolias on Netflix in 2025, and performing stage readings well into 2026. Alice Ghostley was born on August 14, 1923, in Eve, Missouri, a town so small it barely existed on a map, and she spent her entire life making people laugh by playing women who were wonderfully, helplessly lost. She won a Tony Award on Broadway in 1965, appeared in To Kill a Mockingbird and Grease, and became a beloved face on television as the bumbling witch Esmeralda on Bewitched. But for 7 seasons on Designing Women, she was Bernice Clifton, the sugar baker's eccentric family friend who could never quite remember where she was, who frequently arrived fresh from a funeral she had no business attending, and whose rambling stories never quite reached a point. The audience loved her completely. In 1992, the Emmy committee finally noticed, nominating her for Outstanding Supporting Actress. In her final years, strokes and colon cancer worked quietly against her. Her husband of 50 years, actor Felice Rolandi, had died in 2003, leaving her alone in their Studio City home. On September 21, 2007, at the age of 84, Alice Ghostley passed away peacefully at that same home. Hal Holbrook was born on February 17, 1925, in Cleveland, Ohio, and he spent decades becoming one of those rare actors whose presence alone could command silence. His most defining work came from the stage, where he performed Mark Twain Tonight. For over 60 years, turning himself into Mark Twain so completely that audiences forgot where the man ended and the character began. When he appeared on Designing Women, he played Reese Watson, the calm, steady, and deeply composed love interest to Julia Sugarbaker, portrayed by his real-life wife Dixie Carter, bringing a quiet strength that balanced the show's fiery energy. Beyond television, he was unforgettable as the mysterious Deep Throat in All the President's Men, and later earned an Oscar nomination at the age of 82 for his deeply moving role in Into the Wild. Even in his later years, he continued working with the same dedication that defined his entire life. On January 23, 2021, at the age of 95, Hal Holbrook passed away peacefully at his home in Beverly Hills, leaving behind a legacy built not on noise, but on presence, discipline, and a lifetime of unforgettable performances. Richard Gilliland was born on January 23, 1950, in Fort Worth, Texas, and became a familiar face on television, best remembered for Designing Women, where he played J.D. Shackelford, the easygoing and supportive boyfriend of Mary Jo Shively, a role that felt so natural that it hardly seemed like acting at all. It was also on that set where he met Jean Smart, the woman who would become his wife for more than 30 years, turning an on-screen connection into a real-life love that quietly lasted decades. Beyond that show, he moved through series like Operation Petticoat, 30-something, and Party of Five, always bringing a calm, steady presence that made every character feel real. Then, suddenly, after a brief illness linked to a heart condition, everything stopped. On March 18, 2021, at the age of 71, at his home in Los Angeles, Richard Gilliland passed away.